Hello, and welcome to the AIM North America Cannabis Podcast Series. With nearly 30 years of experience, AIM North America is a nonprofit trade alliance representing organizations that buy, sell, implement, manufacture, and/or use automatic data capture technologies, including RFID, barcode, RTLS, and more. The Cannabis Work Group is an AIM North America committee focusing on the traceability needs of the products moved through the highly regulated cannabis supply chain from seed to sale. This new podcast series will provide insights and expertise to meet traceability and package labeling requirements for growers, processors, distributors, and retailers within the cannabis community.
Welcome to the Cannabis Podcast Series hosted by AIM North America. AIM North America is a nonprofit trade alliance representing organizations that buy, sell, implement, manufacture, and/or use automatic data capture technologies, including RFID, barcode, RTLS, and more. Today, we're going to discuss cannabis, hemp-derived cannabinoids, product safety, and testing across the United States. I'm Duane Roebuck, chair of the AIM North America Work Group and retail and IoT channel manager for BlueStar. I'll be moderating today's discussion with Travis Wayne. Travis, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Dwayne. Appreciate it. So my name is Travis Wayne, and I work as a product manager here at TEKLYNX. We develop barcode and label design and label management software, used across regulated and unregulated industries, so like food and bev, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, and of course, cannabis. So our tools just help companies ensure compliance and traceability, and safety through accurate labeling. So in those industries today, in cannabis, of course, we're seeing labeling becoming more tightly integrated, more product testing, more supply chain visibility. And so our role in the cannabis industry, is becoming more increasingly critical. So I'm just glad to be here today, and thanks, Dwayne, for the intro.
Thank you. Would you mind introducing the audience to today's topic?
Yeah, sure thing. So today we wanted to talk about product safety and testing across the cannabis industry, and hemp-derived cannabinoids in the United States. So we're really focused on the US. We're going to do a special focus on the challenges and some of the inconsistencies that we do have, from a lack of federal standardization. So while maybe there are federal laws, but a standardization across all of the individual states isn't there today. And so we want to talk about that. And so while some states do have comprehensive regulations and licensing, others are still evolving or they haven't legalized any cannabis at all. So that results in products and producers and retailers and regulators that are facing just unique challenges state by state. So it's always a little bit different from one state to the next. Um, and I think from a technology standpoint, from an AIM standpoint, we want to help provide some understanding of things that customers and producers can look for and or do, to ensure compliance, and leveraging trusted third-party labs and others that play an essential role in this process.
Yeah, just to get some consistency across the organization. Because like you said, everything seems to be so bifurcated in this industry. So it'll be, great when we reach a point where, there's consistency. So let's start with cannabis first. In the states where recreational and or medical is legal, what do the testing requirements look like?
Yeah, I would like to say that I know all of the details in every single state, but I don't.
What?
We can name some of
You
the
don't?
right? Man, if somebody does, that's impressive. Yeah, so in states where cannabis is legal, in those states, testing is mandatory and it is enforced by state regulatory bodies. And so each of those states have their own particular requirements. So California has their own, Oregon has their own, Massachusetts, Colorado, name all of the states that have legalized cannabis. They each have their own requirements and regulations associated to producing and labeling and selling those products. Um, and just to talk a little bit about the testing. So when they're required to do testing, you could just say, well, we did our lab test and there's this much THC and this much terpene but they often, well, they focus on or leverage the ISO standard or IEC accredited labs. And they also focus on things like heavy metals and pesticides and microbes and um, mold or mycotoxins, residual solvents, and others. And so what they want to do is make sure that they're trying to capture anything that could potentially be harmful to the consumer, and track those on each of those products. And again, that's like through the ISO standard. I don't remember the number for that particular ISO standard, but um, those labs in those states have to do that. So then now let's kind of move forward. So the company, they've made their products and now they're ready to get it tested. So they're going to send that to the lab. They're going to get the test results. And if it passes, then they need to report that information to track and trace system. And there are some larger ones that exist in the United States. Metrc is one, probably the main one. BioTrack plays a role, Leaf Data Systems, and there's others. But it all is dependent on the state. So that data has to be reported back to those organizations, and they house it for the state. So if anybody ever wants to say, hey, where did that product come from? Where did it go to? What were the testing results? They have all of that information in their back pocket. So now they have the information. Now they're ready to put that product in a package and label it for consumer or retail. So that's where you get some packaging, fancy packaging, but it also has to have some really core pieces of information, um, such as a certificate of analysis, a COA, um, other information about the product, and that's where there's label design and software label. So you're doing some labeling, you're designing it, and that software helps those companies do that. So they can grab that data, bring it onto their label, and then get it onto their package.
And
Um,
and just to clarify, like these aren't just any testing labs that you can send it to. They have to be accredited, correct?
yeah, so they need to be ISO, IEC accredited labs in the states where cannabis is legal. So they've formalized that. I believe all of them have formalized that and make that a requirement. I also think they could be like a DEA accredited lab as well.
And okay, so all right,
So
we've
now,
got that.
yeah, so
Uh,
now we got the product and it's got a label on there, and some might say, well, that's too much information to put on a package, and in some cases it is. So maybe they have a small package. What they'll do is they'll throw a QR code on there, and that QR code will help the retailer or the consumer be able to scan it, and that's usually a link to a website. And on that website, they can then provide all of the detail associated to that particular product. So it's just a nice way to be able to still provide all of the detail without having like trifolds on a label, but get that information to consumers.
cool, cool, cool. So on the cannabis side of things, I mean, even though it's cloudy, it seems fairly straightforward. The next topic is the one I'm particularly interested in, because we're seeing more and more instances of hemp-derived cannabis, especially in the non-legal states, being put out there, and people confusing it with actual, cannabis. What can you share with the audience that might help, clarify and really demystify some of that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I live in a non-legal state, Wisconsin, so I get to see it firsthand on a daily. Well, I guess if you went into the stores on a daily, but I mean, I do get to see it, and I've actually went into some of the stores to see what exactly is going on, talk to some of the people that own those businesses to see what they're doing from a labeling perspective, and it's all over the place. There isn't a standard in the state of Wisconsin associated to this where they're required, here's the regulation that you're required to follow. So we probably need to dig into that a little bit. Um, so we have in the state of Wisconsin and other non-legal states, um, there are products that are derived from hemp. CBD, you can derive delta 8 THC. You can also take that and convert it into something that's called HHC. I don't know a ton about it. I do know it exists though, and probably other products as well. And it's sold through a loophole. There's a 2018 US Farm Bill out there that legalized hemp as long as it contained less than 0.3% THC. So hemp is used in many products, and that's the reason why this bill was put in place, not for consuming, but for rope, for other things like that. Um, I'm sure somebody on this call or listening to this podcast probably knows a lot more about, oh, these are all the uses of hemp, but for
No, no,
the
no. One of the more intriguing use cases is when I found out that the first flag that Betsy Ross actually did for the United States was made out of hemp. So, talk about a full circle moment.
there we go, durable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, in states where they're just leveraging that farm bill, they're taking just massive amounts of hemp and then they're condensing it down, because it's only 0.3%. But when you condense it down, you can get full THC from a product, Delta 8, Delta 9. Um,
So I know it's kind of like a wild, wild west out there where every state is doing their own thing. Can we just drill down to your state and talk about some of the things that are going on with
yeah,
hemp-derived cannabinoids in Wisconsin?
yeah, sure. Yeah, so in Wisconsin, no recreational, no medical. But you can go to a store, you can go to a gas station, you can buy a THC product. Hemp is legal here, so they're working through that loophole. The Wisconsin Department of Agriculture manages that. There's also a trade and consumer protection organization that also plays a role in that the test the testing requirements here are only for the hemp at the grower level. After that, you can do whatever you want with that hemp.
Mm.
So it's less than 0.3% at the grower level, and now here you go. And here is, 2 tons of hemp. Somebody can take that and they can start processing that. Um, and after it leaves the grower, it is not tested ever again. It doesn't have to be tested ever again. There's no regulation around that. So like gummies and oils and vapes, they remain largely untested, though a lot of people do put some information on the label. However, we'll get into, what that entails. So it's unregulated right now. It's potential for mislabeling, yet it's available across the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah, let's start talking about that because I've made a conscious endeavor, I'd say the past year or so to speak with some of my friends, with their, teenagers because they seem to believe that this hemp-derived cannabis is the same thing that you get out of a dispensary. And they don't realize, some of the threats and safety risks that can be, affiliated, with consuming something. I don't want to say that, everything is bad, but the reality of it is that there's no regulation, anything is possible. So, Travis, would you mind sharing some of the safety risks and testing recommendations as it relates to hemp-derived cannabis?
Sure. Yeah, and before I go too far, I am sure there are some companies that are doing all the right things. They are getting it tested at a ISO certified lab. They're labeling it correctly, so it's not everybody. However, because everybody can play in this industry and it's unregulated, there are the risks, and so some of the risks are um, a company that you have to use solvents to really like get and extract the THC from that hemp. And so there could be residual solvents left in that product, butane or hexane, from the extraction process. There could be heavy metals not being tested for. There can be microbes. There can be mold. Um, it definitely could be inaccurately labeled from a potency perspective. So it might be too much or something potentially a little bit different than what you were expecting. Um, they're able to modify THC by adding hydrocarbon, I believe. No, I'm getting outside of my realm a bit, for the
What?
HHC product or other products like that, and not
Yeah,
testing.
yeah, yeah. The funny thing is I have a buddy of mine, him and his wife, they live in Seattle. Her family is from Wisconsin, ironically. And he was telling me, he's like, man, they sell, weed all over the place. And I was telling him about the hemp derived. And so the last time he was in Wisconsin, he actually, picked up some, and I'm not going to say any names. Somehow it ended up in Seattle. He had it tested. And when he got the test results, we were floored because Eagle 20 was in there, which is, a pesticide that's used in other produce, and it's safe if you consume it orally, but if you smoke it, it can lead to cyanide in the lungs.
Hmm.
So, obviously that's not something you want, a lot of people to, consume, especially in that manner. So let me ask you this. If somebody's going to use these, which, I don't tend to recommend or advocate for, but people are going to do what they're going to do, what recommendations would you make in terms of, like, yes, it's not going to probably be 100% safe, but safer? What would you recommend?
Well, if you're not going to do some due diligence and really research a particular company, ensure that they're doing testing with a certified lab, an ISO lab, IEC lab, or DEA approved lab, then don't use it. It's just as easy as that. Just don't, because you don't know. And like you said, it could have many things in there, and and that's news to me. I didn't know that it was different, from the smoking or vaping compared to ingesting. So, and because we
Well, it's
don't
only with
know,
that particular chemical.
right? But, I don't know, maybe there's more out there. I don't know. And like I said, I'm just trying to bring forth some of the concerns that we've identified, or at least I've heard of, in Wisconsin. Um, but I guess just really making sure that the product that you're getting, you're actually looking at the label, you're researching that company, you're ensuring that that company's test results are being done by a certified, approved ISO lab. Um, and then that gives you a little bit more confidence in a particular product. Uh, making sure that they have batch traceability. That's the hard part. Now they said it was tested, and it's like, was it from the same batch? Can you show
Right.
me that? And that gets a little bit more deep. They were kind of getting in their business a little bit, so it's really hard to say. Um, but just making sure that you're not just looking at this little package, but you're going and researching that company that's creating that product, that they have
They could
their
leverage
ducks
that
in a row.
from the QR codes, right?
Yeah, exactly. You get and then go see the COA, certificate of analysis, and dig into that a little bit. Sounds like a lot of work though, right?
It is, but hey, I feel like this. If you're going to be ingesting something, we take a number of risks just in, food and what we drink, and so it's like you might as well do your due diligence on everything. I know that there's a lot of, there's been some recent studies on, Delta 8 products sold in non-legal states and what they contain. Would you
Mhm.
mind elucidating on, some of that, giving us some clarity in terms of what they actually found out in some of these studies?
Sure, sure. And just to go back to your point, I think a lot of people feel like, hey, if this product's in a store, it's got to be safe, right? They're not going to put
Right.
something in a store that's not safe. But I will tell you,
Right.
in this particular case, that is not the case. So, always make sure you're doing your research on a particular product. But yeah, to talk about, there was a study done by the U.S. Cannabis Council. Then they were showing that many of the Delta 8 products that were being sold in the states that didn't legalize THC, that many of them had more than 0.3% Delta 9 in those products. Many of them had contaminants in those products, cutting agents, synthetic byproducts, and sometimes even metals. And the labels that were on the packages were often they were off by more than 20% from the actual content. So even if you go through all of the stuff, and you look at that label on that package, you got to make sure that you're looking at the company that's making that and that they're doing all of the right things. Like I said, many of them I'm sure are. However, they're not required to. So, and because of that, there is a risk to just going and grabbing a product and thinking it's what it says on the package.
No, great points. All great points. So to wrap this up, could you please give us an overall synopsis on your thoughts in terms of product safety in cannabis, hemp, well, cannabis and hemp derived, and what what's the key information that if nothing else, you want people to take this away from our discussion?
Yeah, sure. Again, so I got younger kids, so I got an older kid now too. That's 21, and I've just said, make sure, I don't know if you're doing it or if you are, just make sure you are doing your research. Just because the regulation, it varies state by state. Um, there's a responsibility though that every manufacturer should feel to ensure a safe product. Um, and those businesses that will be there in the long term, they need to build trust and be transparent with what they're doing and just voluntarily align with the best practice. So take a look at a state that is actually has legalized THC and what are they doing and really try to abide by all of those regulations that they're following in their state and bring that to the non-regulated state. And that might mean, utilizing a third-party tester that is ISO certified, DEA approved, clearly labeling their products and enabling traceability, batch or lot or whatnot in their supply chain. And then consumers, they need to look for products that are doing that, that are providing clear COAs, that are showing their batch numbers, that are coming from companies that are really open and disclose, this is how we test our products, this is how we are tracking everything, and this is how we are ensuring a quality product for you. And then just ultimately, the industry needs standardization of lab testing and labeling, whether it's legal or not legal. I mean, I feel like every state could do that at a minimum. Maybe not. Maybe there's a lot of legislation around that and pushback, that it's not a legal requirement. But I feel like companies that are in this industry, they just need to do it to
Yeah.
show that they're a good company.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Unfortunately, most of these guys don't move until, or a lot of these guys, I should say, won't move until the law moves them in that direction. It's unfortunate.
There's a cost to it, so yeah, I
Yeah,
understand, but there's also safety.
right. I remember when they had the issues with the tobacco vapes and the vitamin E acetate,
Mm,
and people were dying off of that. So, one would think, we learn from our lessons, but we'll see.
yeah.
Um, I'd like to thank you for joining us on today's Cannabis Podcast series hosted by AIM North America. If anyone out there is interested in learning more or to listen to past podcasts, you can please visit www.aim hyphen or dash na.org. The Cannabis Work Group, we meet monthly on the third Tuesday of each month at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And, to be a part or to join our next meeting, which, we would encourage, please send an email, email info@aim-na.org. Thank you very much, and talk to you on the next one.
All right, great. Thank you, Duane.
Thank you for listening to this AIM North America Cannabis podcast. Again, the AIM North America Cannabis Work Group is raising awareness of asset tracking technologies in this highly regulated environment. If you'd like to learn more about these initiatives, you can reach out to us at info@aim-na.org, go to our website at www.aim-na.org, or give us a call at 724-742-4473.